in our sleepy cul-de-sac, where time seemed to stroll rather than rush. Tranquility was a cherished commodity, the kind of peace that wraps around you like a comforting quilt, where the rustle of leaves was the only interruption, or at least it had been, until Karen moved in. Karen, with her perfectly coiffed hair and a gaze sharp enough to pierce steel, was not just a neighbor. She was a force of nature. She arrived with the force of a hurricane. Her presence felt in every corner of our little community. Her reign began quietly, but inevitably, like the first ominous rumble of a distant storm. The first sign was simple, almost laughably so. A single, terse letter slipped into mailboxes under the guise of neighborhood improvement. Regulations, she called them. Guidelines, she insisted. But they were more like edicts from a self-appointed monarch, detailing the precise shade of beige acceptable for a mailbox, or the allowable height of lawn grass down to the quarter inch. It was almost admirable, this dedication to mediocrity. Most of us shrugged it off, indulging her whims with a nod and a wave. After all, a bit of eccentricity was tolerable, but it was a prelude, a subtle overture to the symphony of chaos she was composing. Only later would we realize that our complacency was the first misstep on her path to tyranny. My lawn was my sanctuary, a patch of earth where I could escape the world and lose myself in the rhythm of nature. Its beauty was in its wildness, the grass swaying freely in the breeze, a vibrant tapestry of greens and golds. But to Karen, it was a blight, a rebellion against her imposed order. Then, without warning, came the paving crew. The roar of machinery shattered the morning calm. Like an unwelcome alarm, I stood there, dumbfounded, as they laid asphalt over my sanctuary, a cold, black expanse where life once thrived, a testament to her iron will, and a stark declaration that no space was beyond her reach. Anger flared, a hot coal in my chest, but I held it in check. Emotion was a luxury I couldn't afford. There were ways to reclaim peace, quieter paths to justice, and as I watched her directing the workers with the precision of a maestro, I realized that patience could be as potent as any weapon. It was ironic, really. Her attempt at control was merely sowing the seeds of her own undoing. She paved over my lawn, but she couldn't pave over my resolve. There was a lesson she had yet to learn. Nature always finds a way to reclaim what is hers. I waited, biding my time, like the calm before the storm, a plan unfurling in my mind. As inevitable as the change of seasons, Karen, with all her bluster, wouldn't see it coming. She had paved over more than just my lawn. She had paved a path to her own downfall. She just didn't know it yet. Saturday morning wore a cloak of deceptive serenity, the kind that hinted at peace but camouflaged chaos just beneath the surface. I stepped outside, the crisp air biting my cheeks, only to find a garish yellow sign staked into what used to be my lawn. Notice of violation, it declared in bold, self-righteous letters. It seemed Karen had wasted no time. The asphalt still glistened with newness, a jarring scar on the neighborhood's complexion. Karen, with her clipboard as her scepter, had declared a war of attrition, issuing citations like confetti at a parade. My offense, non-compliance with community aesthetic standards. I couldn't decide if I should laugh or scream. Her rules unfurled like a banner of absurdity. Grass height regulations, flower color coordination, trash can positioning precise to the inch. Her vision of perfection was an Iron Maiden disguised as community order. I glanced around, noticing the ripple effect. Neighbors whispered behind closed doors, eyes peering through blinds. Karen's authority was a shadow stretching long and wide. She planted seeds of discord, nurturing them with gossip masquerading as concern. It spread like wildfire, consuming reason and common sense. The neighborhood had become a stage, and Karen its self-appointed director, orchestrating our lives with an iron will and a rehearsed smile. But the more she tightened her grip, the more the subtle rebellion simmered beneath the surface. There was strength in our shared silence, a quiet defiance, brewing like a storm on the horizon. Still, the violation notices piled up, a litter of paper that screamed for attention. Each one was a reminder of her power trip, a tally of her obsession with control. The others were beginning to feel it too, the bite of her authority, the suffocation of her standards. But confrontation lingered just out of reach, an uneasy truce holding us hostage to her whims. That evening, as the sun slinked away, I took a walk. The air was thick with tension and the scent of Karen's floral potpourri. As I passed the Andersons' house, their garden now a display of regulation perfection, Mrs. Anderson gave me a nod, subtle, almost imperceptible. It spoke volumes. We were not alone. Karen's fortress of rules was not impenetrable. Every citation she issued, every whisper she spread, only bound us tighter together in silent resistance. My lawn, now a patchwork quilt of tar and spite, was the catalyst, her misstep, her overreach. The irony was almost poetic. Her efforts to divide only served to unite us, and in that unity, a plan was forming, quietly, carefully, step by deliberate step. We would not meet her tyranny with equal force. No, we would be the water that wore down the stone, the gentle pressure that cracked the dam. Her reign was built on a foundation of arrogance, and she hadn't expected the ground to shift beneath her feet. I turned back towards my house, a solitary figure in a neighborhood alive with whispered rebellion. In the distance, Karen's silhouette lingered on the horizon. Oblivious to the change in the air, she had paved over my lawn, but she hadn't paved over our resolve. Her story would not end as she intended, and soon she would leave not with triumph, but in handcuffs. The concrete was still warm, like an unwelcome blanket. It covered the once vibrant green expanse that had been my lawn, now a dull gray mark of territorial encroachment. Karen, the HOA president with an overbearing sense of entitlement, had wielded her authority like a blunt instrument, paving over my land without a word of warning. Her little empire of rules and regulations had finally overstepped its bounds. I stood there, coffee in hand, observing the stark transformation. The air was tinged with the acrid scent of cement, swirling in the early morning breeze. The sight was an affront, an invasion on my patch of tranquility, yet anger had receded, leaving a calm resolve in its wake. I'd prepared for something like this, though I hadn't anticipated the audacity. The neighborhood was waking up. Curtains rustled. Car engines grumbled to life, and the soft hum of daily routines began. But beneath the surface, there was a tension, an unspoken awareness that something was brewing. Karen had overreached, and now the reckoning was at hand. I walked back inside, the door clicking shut behind me with a sense of finality. The living room was a sanctuary, a place to think and plan. On the table lay a neat stack of documents, evidence of Karen's overzealous governance, photographs from prior incidents, printouts of emails with her veiled threats, and the pièce de resistance, a copy of the deed to my property, clearly demarcating the boundaries she had so brazenly ignored. Information was power, and I had gathered my arsenal quietly, methodically. The state of my lawn was the last straw, a tipping point that would turn her arrogance against her. The day passed with a slow crawl, each hour a step closer to a carefully orchestrated confrontation. I spent the time revisiting each piece of evidence, ensuring everything was in order. My calm demeanor belied the storm beneath, a steady resolve that would not be shaken. By afternoon, the sun was a golden orb, casting long shadows across the concrete. I made my way to the council meeting, documents tucked under my arm like a shield. The community center was a sterile building, its walls echoing with the murmurs of neighborhood politics. Inside, the room was already half full, residents seated in neat rows, Karen perched at the front like a self-anointed monarch, exuded an air of smug control. The meeting unfolded with its usual monotony, a parade of trivial complaints and mundane updates. But as the agenda progressed, a subtle shift occurred. Eyes turned towards me. The moment had arrived. With deliberate steps, I approached the front, the room's attention coalescing around me. Karen's facade of confidence wavered, just a flicker of uncertainty crossing her features. I laid out the documents, the paper whispering against the table as I unfolded my case. I spoke clearly, each word a precise incision into her pretensions of power. The evidence was damning. Her actions, unauthorized and reckless. The concrete, a tangible testament to her disregard for personal property. As I concluded, the room held its breath, a collective weight of expectation hanging in the air. Then, a ripple, the soft murmur of agreement, a tide turning against her. And there, in that moment, Karen's empire crumbled, her authority, once absolute, now in tatters, before the undeniable truth. She stood, a protest forming on her lips, but it was drowned by the response of the community, a slow, inevitable march towards justice. The police, summoned quietly earlier, entered with a calm authority, a brief exchange, enough to capture the essence of the situation. Karen's eyes widened, indignation giving way to disbelief. The handcuffs clicked shut, a final punctuation on her reign of overreach. The room watched in silence, a tableau of quiet satisfaction. As she was led away, I caught her eye. For the first time, she seemed to understand the true weight of her actions. The irony settled over the scene like dust, an ending she hadn't anticipated. My lawn would recover, the green eventually reclaiming its territory. But Karen's rule was a story that had finally met its conclusion. The early morning sun filtered through the lace curtains, casting delicate patterns on the floor like ghostly fingerprints. I stood at the window, sipping my coffee, and observed the alien landscape that was once my lawn. Karen's concrete monument to control gleamed arrogantly in the dawn light, a silent testament to her audacity. It was as if the earth itself had been suffocated beneath her heavy hand. A light breeze stirred the leaves overhead, whispering secrets of resistance. I smiled, not in triumph, but in anticipation. The dance had begun. Neighbors, usually preoccupied with their morning routines, paused to take in the spectacle. Their eyes flitted over the unnatural expanse of gray, brows furrowing in confusion. A few shook their heads, the absurdity of the situation likely churning in their thoughts. Concrete, where grass should be. Karen had underestimated the power of community curiosity. I watched as Mrs. Henderson, typically averse to confrontation, peered out from behind her hydrangeas, a frown etched across her face. Her husband, a man of few words and fewer expressions, stood beside her, hands on hips, scanning the hardened landscape. Their quiet disapproval was a symphony of support. The morning air buzzed with an unspoken energy, a tension that crackled like static before a storm. There was a certain justice in the way the neighborhood rallied, not with shouts or signs, but with quiet observation. Karen's world was built on noise. Yet here was a silence she couldn't break with her usual bluster. By midday, the street had become a gallery of whispers. Groups formed, broke apart, then reformed, each conversation adding another stroke to the canvas of communal discontent. I watched their movements, feeling like the eye of a storm calm amidst the swirling chaos. The power of the collective was a subtle but potent force. Then, amid the hushed discussions, the sound of tires on pavement, a police car, sleek and authoritative, gliding down the street like a predator. It stopped with an understated finality in front of my driveway. The feeling of inevitability settled over me. A single officer emerged, his presence a pivot in the unfolding drama. His gaze swept over the scene. Taking in the strange tableau, he approached me, his expression a mask of professionalism. There was a moment suspended in time, where our eyes met, understanding passed between us like a silent accord. Karen emerged from her house, summoned by the unseen threat of authority. Her steps faltered as she absorbed the scene, the neighbors, the officer, the concrete that had become her accidental downfall. In that instant, her carefully constructed facade of control began to crumble. The realization struck her like a physical blow, her features shifting from confidence to confusion. Then, fear. The officer turned to her, his words barely above a whisper, but heavy with consequence. One sentence, one moment of revelation. Karen's face paled, her bravado evaporating under the weight of accountability. She had not expected this outcome, a plan unraveling like a poorly knit sweater. As the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, the neighborhood stood in mute solidarity. It was not about triumph or revenge. It was about justice, about reclaiming a sense of balance. And as the police car drove away, the concrete still glistening in the sun, I felt the earth beneath it breathe a sigh of relief. As I stood by my window, the intoxicating aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted under my nose. The cup warmed my hand, offering a strange comfort as I watched the stillness of the early morning. The world outside seemed untouched by the chaos Karen had brought into my life. The once verdant expanse of my lawn now lay beneath a suffocating blanket of asphalt, a harsh, black scar against the neighborhood's tapestry of greens and browns. Her audacity was impressive, really, a monument to her overreach, a shrine to her ego. There was something poetic about it, in a way, that she thought it could all be so permanent. The legal papers I'd filed sat neatly stacked on my kitchen table, their presence a silent promise of justice. I had woven my case through the intricate web of municipal codes and property rights, each page a testament to months of quiet diligence. Karen had underestimated me, a mistake that would soon become her reckoning. I took a sip of coffee, its bitter warmth grounding me in the moment. The world outside gradually awoke, the sun casting long shadows that crept methodically across the asphalt. I marveled at the thought of her reaction, once she realized that this time, she wasn't calling the shots. Over the past weeks, I had learned much about the shadowed corridors of bureaucracy, becoming intimately familiar with the language of legalese that twisted its way through every council meeting I attended. There was an art to it, one that I had come to appreciate. Each clause and subsection was a tool, and in my hands, they were instruments of precision. The day of reckoning arrived with an unsettling calmness. I watched from my window as the officer's car rolled to a stop in front of Karen's house. The sun cast a warm glow on its gleaming paint, a stark contrast to the chill settling in my bones. I had wondered how this moment would feel if justice would come with fanfare or a quiet certainty. I opted for the latter. The officer, a stocky figure in a crisp uniform, moved with the steady resolve of someone doing their duty. Karen's door opened with the loud creak of hinges that hadn't been oiled in years, an ironic echo of her own efforts to control the neighborhood's aesthetic. In my mind, I imagined her indignation, her endless litany of protests. Her world was one of control. And here it was, unraveling thread by thread. Through the window, I caught a brief glimpse of her face, a tapestry of confusion and shock, all too aware of the eyes now settling upon her house. The neighbors, silent witnesses to the spectacle, stood at a respectful distance. Their whispers were soft, barely audible, like the rustling of leaves in the wind, yet their presence was a chorus of quiet validation. I was not alone in my fight. I took another sip of coffee, savoring its bitterness. It seemed the right flavor for a moment like this. My heart drummed a steady rhythm against my ribs, a quiet celebration of a battle hard won. The officer's handcuffs clicked with a finality that resonated through the air, a sharp note of reality breaking the symphonic silence. There was no need for words, no triumphant declaration. The truth was simple: she hadn't expected to leave in handcuffs, but then again, neither had she expected that the quiet neighbor across the street could become her undoing. It was an irony that tasted as rich and satisfying as the last sip of coffee sliding down my throat. As the early morning light seeped through the blinds, I felt the anticipation of resolution crackling in the air. Much like the first whisper of rain against parched earth, the remnants of last night's storm, a symphony of wind and rain, left a renewed scent of earth and promise. The community was stirring, not only from slumber but from the chains of Karen's rule. I stood by the window, watching the neighborhood awaken, cars slowly filling driveways, children with backpacks gathering at bus stops, all moving to the rhythm of a new day. The paving job on my lawn that Karen orchestrated was still an eyesore, a stark reminder of her audacity. Yet today, it was nothing more than a prop in the grand theater that would unfold. A quiet confidence settled over me. We'd done our homework. The community's silent majority had gathered evidence, each piece fitting together like an intricate puzzle: unauthorized financial dealings, misuse of HOA funds. Karen's empire wasn't just built on concrete, it was built on sand. The meeting at the community hall was set for noon. It felt like waiting for a tightly wound spring to release. As I walked towards the hall, each step carried the weight of expectation, yet lightened with the camaraderie of shared purpose. Neighbors nodded, a silent acknowledgement of the change coming. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Karen sat at the head of the table, her aura of authority dimmed, yet still flickering. She wore her confidence like armor, oblivious to the cracks in its surface. Faces around the room mirrored my own resolve, a tapestry of defiance and anticipation. We were ready. The evidence was presented methodically, each revelation a nail in the coffin of Karen's reign. Her face, usually a mask of control, started to fray at the edges, revealing the panic beneath. She fumbled, a deer caught in the headlights of her own making, trying to rally support. But her words were empty echoes in a room that had already moved on. As the last piece of evidence was placed on the table, the room held its breath. The silence was palpable, like the pause before a thunderclap, and then it happened. The authorities, alerted and prepared, stepped forward. Karen's face was a canvas of disbelief, a caricature of her former self. Her departure was swift, handcuffs clicking shut were the punctuation mark on her chapter in our lives. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very rules she wielded as weapons were the chains now binding her. With Karen gone, a collective exhale filled the room. We were free. The community, once fractured under her rule, felt whole again. Plans formed to restore what had been lost, starting with my lawn, a symbol of personal space and respect, reclaimed. As I walked home, the sun broke through the clouds, casting the neighborhood in a warm embrace. I paused by the edge of my property, imagining the vibrant green grass that would soon replace the cold concrete. The world felt new, washed clean by the storm. The air was alive with possibilities, the past, a shadow receding in the growing light of a new dawn.